So I was browsing eBay the other day and I came across this, a 13-inch Retina MacBook Pro for only $40 with free shipping. Obviously, $40 for any working and somewhat modern MacBook is a great deal, but one with a Retina display is an absolute steal. And after using this one for a few days now, I can pretty confidently say that this is the best deal I have ever gotten on a Mac. If you've ever shopped eBay for a cheap MacBook, you'll know that it's super hit or miss. And most listings under $50 are for old Core 2 Duo MacBooks that really aren't going to be usable today. And you also have to factor in whether or not the hard drive or SSD has been removed and if a battery is going to hold a charge. So I came across this MacBook while I was doing my typical rounds on eBay, searching for MacBooks under $50 and sorting them by newest listed. It seemed to be listed by a somewhat reputable tech company, but it did have a flashing folder with a question mark on the display. It was listed as a 2014 model, although the description was a little bit back and forth about what processor it had. And curiously, it said it had 4GB of RAM, although Apple never made a 2014 MacBook Pro with only 4GB of RAM. So I assumed that was a mistake and I would be getting at least 8GB of RAM. But the listing also said this MacBook had a working battery and a 256GB SSD. So needless to say, I pulled the trigger on this one pretty fast. When I received the MacBook, I was really impressed. It looked to be in really great condition with only a minor scratch on the display lid and a few dents on the bottom case. The display was a bit dirty, but surprisingly had absolutely no delamination. Delamination was an extremely common issue on Apple's Retina MacBooks made from 2012 to 2015. It would result in really unsightly looking displays, especially when you would view them in the light. I then connected a charger and booted into my macOS Big Sur installer. I then erased the 256GB SSD and got macOS Big Sur installed. And after I installed macOS, I realized that this is a pretty decently optioned machine. It has the mid-tier 2.8GHz dual-core i5, and most surprisingly, 16GB of RAM. I came to find out that this model originally cost $1799 when new, and that 16GB RAM upgrade cost $200. So the original owner paid $2,000 for this MacBook Pro. Strangely though, this configuration came stock with a 512GB SSD, but we only have a 256GB one here. So that must have been swapped at some point, but thankfully it's still an Apple SSD. And importantly, the battery is in good shape on this MacBook as well. It has just under 500 cycles with no sort of service warnings. It's still holding a charge of around 5,000 milliamp hours, and that's definitely enough to get around 4 to 5 hours of use. I did notice that the fan spun up pretty loud during the macOS install, so I figured there was a lot of dust inside. I removed the back panel and found tons of caked on dust all over the logic board. I gave it a good cleaning and also removed the heatsink to apply new thermal paste to the CPU. And that definitely made a huge improvement. I haven't had any high fan noise since doing that. One of the best things about this MacBook Pro is the port selection. You have a dedicated MagSafe port for charging, 2 Thunderbolt ports, 2 USB ports, and a headphone jack. You also get an HDMI port and an SD card slot. And of course we have to discuss the incredible Retina display that this generation of MacBook was named after. So this is a 13.3-inch display with a resolution of 2560 by 1600. And that comes out to 227 pixels per inch, which is incredibly sharp. And although it may seem kind of strange to call this a Retina MacBook Pro, the reason it is because Apple did not include Retina displays on their standard models. So you would have to pay extra to upgrade to this Retina model. Apple continued offering a non-Retina display 13-inch MacBook Pro all the way through late 2016. And this older 1280 by 800 panel was not only worse in resolution and pixel density, it was also much more reflective as it was not a laminated display. So as the Retina display was laminated, it eliminated an air gap between the display and cover glass, ultimately making it much less reflective. And of course it also included the anti-reflective coating if yours was lucky enough to stay adhered and not peel off. The Retina display also offered improved off-axis viewing angles. So tilting the displays, you can see the colors would wash out much more on the non-Retina model, while the Retina model would retain its color pretty much at any angle. This display is lacking some features from the newest MacBook Pros. It doesn't have the 120Hz high refresh rate. It also doesn't have True Tone or the P3 color, and it's also not a mini LED panel, so the black levels won't be as great. But of course, keeping this in perspective, this is absolutely fantastic for a $40 MacBook Pro. The keys on this keyboard use a scissor switch design, and it's actually very similar to what the newest MacBooks have. So you get a good distance of key travel, it feels really tactile, and you get a great sense of what you're doing with this keyboard. The trackpad, however, is a bit of an older design. This was the final mechanically clicking trackpad that Apple made. The 2015 MacBooks would switch to a Force Touch trackpad that would simulate clicks with vibration motors. The only thing that I really miss from a Force Touch trackpad is the ability to click over the full surface. So it's a bit stiff if you would click up here. You really need to do it near the bottom of the trackpad. Apple replaced the Retina generation MacBook Pro in 2016 for the Touch Bar generation. And infamously, they switched to entirely USB-C ports. That meant that users had to carry around adapters for things like HDMI, SD cards, and USB-A ports. The 2016 MacBook Pros brought the new Butterfly keyboard, and this keyboard was really hated for its small key travel and also reliability issues. So I definitely understand why people preferred the keyboard on the Retina MacBook Pro generation. I've been using this MacBook Pro for the last few days, and it's been absolutely fantastic for basic tasks. Watching YouTube videos and listening to music and typing documents are all really easily handled by this MacBook Pro. This MacBook does struggle to edit videos though. I noticed that 4K video editing was just pretty much not possible. And 1080p editing is possible, however it's not a really great experience. Software support is definitely another area to discuss on this laptop though. As I mentioned, this laptop is running macOS Big Sur, and that was the last version that Apple officially supports on these 2014 MacBook Pros. I've been fine using Big Sur on this machine because Apple Music still works, I'm able to use iWork apps like Pages, and Big Sur also supports the latest version of Google Chrome, so you can do fully updated web browsing. However, I did want to note that using OpenCore Legacy Patcher, you can easily update this MacBook to the newest version of macOS. Of course, this MacBook does not hold a candle to the newest Apple Silicon MacBooks, but for $40, you really can't ask it to do that. And overall, I've just been really impressed with this MacBook. The going rate for a MacBook like this is around $100 or $120. And although that isn't too bad of a price, I would definitely encourage you to watch eBay and look for a good deal like I got on this one. Like I mentioned earlier, I have a saved search for MacBooks under $50, and I have that sorted by newest listed. So by checking that saved search frequently, I'm able to scoop up deals like this sometimes. So if you enjoyed this look at the cheapest Retina MacBook Pro on eBay, definitely get subscribed and leave me a comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.